Today I'll be covering the French philosopher Émilie Du Châtelet. Émilie Du Châtelet was a French philosopher born in 1706. She was eerily well educated for her time period, and this was possible because she was born into a wealthy, aristocratic family. She was far more educated than most women in her period. One historian, Judith P. Zinsser, thinks that she likely studied alongside her brother, and that was why she was trained in Latin, mathematics, English, Italian, and much, much more. Although she had a significant education, she didn't immediately become a philosopher. She first lived out the average teenage or young woman's life as expected at this time. She knew the court, and she killed it as a courtier. In 1725, a very nice marriage was arranged for her. She was married to a marquis. She had money, he had status. It was a good pair. The first 5 to 6 years of their marriage operated as suspected. She had a girl and then 2 boys with him, and it wasn't until after her children's birth that she began to embark on a more serious career in philosophy. She joined a local salon and was able to have discussions about math, science, and philosophy there. In 1734, she met Voltaire, the famous poet, after the birth of her 3rd child, and their love affair began. He was a poetic silver fox, and she was incredibly intelligent and beautiful, and he fell head over heels. Her husband was aware of the affair. Émilie even boarded Voltaire at their countryside house. Her husband was completely okay with it, because it wasn't publicly known, and it was a good deal for him. Voltaire subsidized their home with his large sums of money, and his standing as a poet brought in prestige. It was at this house where they engaged in intellectual pursuits, battles, and experimentation. I think Émilie really used Voltaire as a resource and a mentor and utilized his existing knowledge to launch her career. They studied moral and natural philosophy, and they read their contemporaries' work and learned together as much as possible. Émilie started with critiques, translations, and commentaries. Her criticisms were of the Bible, though I don't believe these were published until after her death. She had a chapter-by-chapter breakdown of the Bible that pointed out inconsistencies. She condemned the Old Testament God as cruel and proved miracles false. Émilie started writing and publishing initially as a translator and commenter. As a polyglot, she was able to translate many pieces, one of which was Newton's Principia, which she spent her lifetime translating. It's still the translation used today. Zinsser explains the breadth of Madame Du Châtelet's research in this quote. She thinks about everything in ways our scientists do not today. She started with how do we know anything with any kind of certainty? How do we know what we know? Then she talked about the role of God. Then she talked about space, about matter. What is it? She then went on to talk about mechanics. In other words, matter and motion. Judith P. Zinsser. In her early work, Du Châtelet and Voltaire worked together on fire and light. They initially wanted to prove that fire was matter, but their experiments were getting different results, and therefore their work differed from there. They had each given submissions to a competition at the Academy of Sciences. Du Châtelet claimed that light was not matter. She figured that if light from the sun moves really quickly, that it must be lightweight, because if streams of light were made of matter, they would strike ceaselessly with intense force on everything they shone on, destroying everything. And because they did not destroy everything, she believed that light could not be matter. Neither of them won this competition, but she was, thanks to this piece, later published in the French Academy, an honor reserved for very few. Her understanding of light also accounted for colors. She thought that different colors of light must carry different properties. This later was relevant in the discovery of infrared light. Du Châtelet became known for his systematic approach to science and philosophy. Voltaire was a huge fanboy of Newton's, and he really loved his stuff. While Du Châtelet absolutely agreed that Newton had good ideas, she felt that because Newton didn't do experiments, these ideas were underdeveloped. She really didn't like to bring God in as an explanation, and she did not find that to be a sufficient explanation. Her foundations, or lessons in physics, the Institutions de Physique, dealt with the question, if it is true there is a sum of the forces for all the movements that does not change in the universe, how can I as a human being add force by acting freely? For example, with the laws of attraction and gravity, those natural laws are great, but people matter too. And if people are matter, then why can I move my arm up if gravity exists? She wanted a real explanation for themes. Leibniz, a great opposer of Newton, was a great influence on her, and I think that she really tried to harmonize Leibniz and Newton's works in this book. Due to the publication of this book, she was admitted as a member of the Academy of Sciences in the Institute of Bologna. I'm not sure if that's how you say it. She was the third woman to do so. Her last work, which was a public favorite, was a discourse on happiness, the Discours sur le bonheur. Zinsser describes this discourse beginning as a joke or a game between Du Châtelet and Voltaire. It was common for everyone to write a discourse on happiness at this time, and each of them developed it further, kind of as a joke, but she ended up publishing hers. It's a pretty personal discourse. She approaches happiness the same way she approaches science. She wants it to be a systematic process, and she wants to think and reason everything through. Zinsser described that it was Du Châtelet's belief that this systematic approach could and should be applied to all human endeavors. In the dialogue, she describes that we are most happy when we are stable. I think the discourse discourages people from beating up on themselves for having passions. I think instead she encourages all of us to make our passions work for us. She does think that reason is the number one most important thing. All passions should work toward reason. She argued that for women especially, learning and study is the only way for women to gain glory, especially at this time. She says in the discourse that men have lots of ways to attain glory, in military or politics or lots of other ways. However, she says that studying and learning is an ultimate passion, and everyone should engage in it. In this discourse, she is also weighing the consequences of starting an affair with a young man in this dialogue. She talks about love being the supreme passion. The love between two people is incredibly powerful for Du Châtelet, and she shares many personal experiences that she's had with love. Initially, I didn't like the discourse. When I first read it, I thought she was trying to say that when we commit sins against others, we shouldn't have to repent. There's a section where she talks about how some passions are considered sins. She uses gluttony as an example. She said not to worry about being a glutton too much, and I think that when I read this, I took it as, so we shouldn't say sorry if we do something wrong. I applied it immediately to wronging other people, and I thought that she meant this to be an excuse for bad behavior. However, upon further reading and research, I don't think that's what Du Châtelet meant at all. I think that what she meant is that shaming yourself and restricting yourself from ever engaging in a passion isn't real happiness. I think she advertises doing what feels good and right to you. And I think that she wants us to use our passions to our advantage to find reason and to find love. Under that view, I think the discourse is very beautiful. Du Châtelet died due to complications in childbirth in 1749. She was incredibly significant in her day, and she was forgotten in history, or she was simplified to a companion of Voltaire. She worked to unite science and philosophy, and she deserves more credit for the work that she did in her lifetime. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and ring that bell.